Welcome to the Dynasty One podcast. I'm your host, Carl Safchik. Today we have a special episode. We're going to be talking about the Scott Fish Bowl. It's kind of taking over the fantasy community. And I'll be joined by two distinguished guest hosts. That is Jesse Patterson and Jacob Henry. Jesse, our featured writer on the site. You've heard him on the podcast a few times before, and you've heard Jacob on here as well. Jacob is our editor-in-chief. How you doing tonight? Jacob first.
Man, I'm good. I am in the middle of Scott Fish and terrified as hell, but other than that, I'm doing well.
You actually have a pick. You're on the clock right now, and we're going to have you pick on the clock. But before that, how you doing tonight, Jesse?
Good, man. Same thing. I'm just diving right into this Scott Fish Bowl. My first time actually participating, so it's been pretty interesting to say the least.
We have three of the four representatives of the Dynasty One fantasy team that are in the Scott Fish Bowl. We have Jarrett that's in it as well. He's kind of taking a back seat. He's kind of like the man behind the curtain now. He called me a few days ago wanting to get some advice for the Scott Fish Bowl. We ended up talking for about an hour, figured out rankings and stuff like that. So Jacob, hey, let's just go ahead and start the show. While you're on the clock, why don't you tell us your situation, what you're thinking? You know what? Before we do that, let's for the people that don't know what the Scott Fish Bowl is, it's probably the biggest fantasy draft in the world. We had Scott Fish on the show a couple weeks ago, kind of explained it. I think it's 840 teams. If I'm wrong, somebody could correct me.
720, I think.
720, okay. So 60 different divisions of 12. So basically you're in your own little one division of 12 teams. But by the time the playoffs come around, you're in a huge division of, 100, 150 people. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. 2 QB league. Well, it's a super flex league, but you're essentially probably going to be starting two quarterbacks most of the time. Running backs get a extra point for first down, so they're going to be heavily valued. Wide receivers, you could start up to 7, so that's another reason to value wide receivers more heavily. And tight ends get 1.5 yards for first down. So you can kind of put a premium on every position. I think people are avoiding wide receivers a little bit more than they would used to, but other than that, you could pretty much say there's a premium on every position, and people are really trying to figure it out. So with all that being said, Jacob, who do you have on your team so far? What are you thinking? And while you're doing that, go ahead and make the pick.
Yeah, no pressure. So I started out at the 102, which no matter the format this year, at least in redraft, which for us is a little off, but redraft seems to be everybody's going, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, and Ezekiel Elliott in their first picks, PPR standard no matter what. And I started with the 102, ended up with Bell. Then I came back at the 211, picked up Jordan Howard, 302, Todd Gurley. You'll notice a theme. And then in the 411, I picked up Marshawn Lynch before picking up Ben Roethlisberger in the 502. I'm one of those people who really lowered wide receivers, not because I don't think they can score in this system, but I think there is a cap on their performance. And let's be real, there's just a hell of a lot of wide receivers going on right now. But I am at the point where I need to start considering them. So I've been looking at currently sitting at the 611. I've been currently looking at Michael Crabtree, personal favorite of mine, just because he's fairly consistent week to week. He's not terribly affected by the switch that we're used to from PPR to standard. I mean, he's still going to put up 200 points in this league, most likely.
It is almost kind of like a PPR. I put in my scoring system like 3.9 points per catch, just because there was no way to really put in point per first down.
Yeah. Well, when I was running the numbers, it seems like for most wide receivers, you're looking at almost like a half PPR.
Yeah.
So you're going to get, it depends on the wide receiver. Obviously, some guys are going to be, more downfield threats. Some guys are going to be hanging around the line of scrimmage, but it averages out to sort of a 0.5 PPR. But, looking at the numbers the past couple of years, the cutoff for wide receivers in total seems to be they cap at about 250 points. There's a couple exceptions in 2015, but that's sort of what I'm looking at. And then all the top wide receivers from last year basically capped out at 250, except for Brown, I believe. So I'm looking at Crabtree. I'm also looking at another quarterback. The quarterbacks have run hot and heavy in this league, so my choices right now are Flacco and Wentz, which are not particularly inspiring choices. But I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna bite the bullet. I don't have any wide receivers. I want to have some consistency. I think I'm just gonna take sort of the 200 consistent points. It's hard for me to go Crabtree with Lynch on the team as well. I don't know. You guys gonna talk me out of this while I'm sitting here, going back and forth on air?
Well, while you're thinking, I wanted to ask you, with your 102, did you get your preferred player, or would you have preferred David Johnson?
I prefer Bell. The thing that scares me about Johnson in any format right now is he hit that magical 370 touch bearer that we hear all the time. Normally is a 370 carry bearer. I'm just worried behind that offensive line and just the usage he had last year. I'm scared in any redraft format to touch Johnson with the first overall pick. You don't want to screw up that 101.
Jesse, put yourself in Jake's shoes. Who you taking right now?
It's a tough position to be in. I mean, the way he went running back heavy, we actually talked about this in our group chat. He's either going to look like a real genius if he hits on 3 or 4 of those running backs, or he'll be fighting up from the bottom for the whole season, trying to make up room. Did
we talk about it, or did we talk about it?
I think we talked about it.
Okay.
I did anyway, so I'm allowed talking to boot things. So I mean, Jake's put himself in a bit of a corner here where he's right. He's got to kind of diversify positions at this point. If you pass on one of those 2 QBs, what are you going to be left with, farther down?
We're talking about the Deshaun Watson, Sam Bradford tier. I mean, most of the teams already have 2 quarterbacks, so I'm not terribly worried. It's not going to – how much lower than Flacco and Ryan Tannehill and Carson Wentz can you really go? I think it's negligible at a certain point.
In 2 QB, I think you can go much lower. In 1 QB, I get your point. I get your point, but in 2 QB, you need somebody who is probably going to be starting all year.
All right. So my other thing that I'll say about this is the guy. I'm right before the turn, so the guy behind me does already have 2 quarterbacks. So I think I can sit on that for 1 second.
Okay.
Come back with that with my turn. Just for the record, I mean, other running backs that are available. If I really wanted to go 5 running backs in the first 6 picks, we're talking about Tevin Coleman, Amir Abdullah, Mark Ingram.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
The thing with the way that Scott's designed the scoring this year is I'm seeing in my draft particularly a lot of tight ends and running backs, like you said, are going really early. What's the tight end landscape looking like?
Jack Doyle and Zach Ertz, and then a whole bunch of crap for a while. I'm tempted.
Maybe an option there, yeah.
All right, you got to make it on air. You said you were going to do it.
You know what? I'm going to do it. I'm playing with my phone, which I realize is great for podcasting while I'm doing
absolutely enthralling radio right now.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to do Jack Doyle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I got to trust what Jesse says to me, and when Jesse's always right, so you just got to go with it. I'm short on tight end. I'm probably not going to have more than 1 or 2 on the team, and I'm just from talking to you guys even now, I'm confident I can hold off for wide receiver. I know, Carl,
I probably would have went Zach Ertz. That may be my redraft mentality, or I'm sorry, my dynasty mentality going into redraft. But what scares you away from Zach Ertz this year compared to if we're just putting those 2 together?
So I'm gonna be honest, and I'm going for if you remember the Ballad of Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last. I think Doyle has the bigger upside here. I didn't come to get third in my division in Scott Fishbowl. Either I'm going to win or I'm going to get last, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I've accepted that about myself.
All right, Jesse, tell us about your team.
All right, so I'm in the Woody division, and you can make as many jokes about that as you want.
We should say if people that don't know, it's a Disney theme. So there are 60 different divisions of Disney characters. Jesse's just said he's in Woody. I'm in Alice. Alice from Alice in Wonderland. And Jake, what division are you in?
I am in Belle from Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, okay.
Belle's my favorite too.
The Stockholm Syndrome woman, right? That's who that is?
That's the one.
Okay.
I threw it out to my girlfriend. I said, who should I be? And that was her pick. So you can take that for what you want and run with it.
All right. I'm calling the cops right now. Go ahead, Jesse.
So I picked from the number 3 slot in my division. Started off, the same 2 guys went as I think pretty much 90% of the other divisions have gone, which was David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell. So that left me with Zeke Elliott, Aaron Rodgers, or take a stab at one of the top end wide receivers. And I don't know if this is I'm a rookie at the Scott Fishbowl scoring, but I'm still, my first thought is get one of those top stud wide receivers. And I looked at the Odells and Julios and Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, all those kind of guys. And I just know Antonio Brown is targeted so heavily that I know he's going to be getting those points for first downs that Scott's kind of trying to, use to even out the league a little bit. So I said, if I'm going to take one of the stud wide receivers, give me the one that's going to get targeted so many times a game that it's going to basically, still make him a stud in the scoring position. So I took Antonio Brown.
Okay. And then what else did you do with the rest of your team?
Following that, I was pretty nervous about getting another running back because running backs started just flying off the board. Melvin Gordon went right after me. LaShawn McCoy, J.J. They just started a nice big run on running backs there. So I started panicking a little bit. Luckily enough, at 210, I got Todd Gurley. So I feel pretty comfortable with that as my starting running back.
Let's talk about Todd Gurley for a second. From a dynasty point of view too, I guess if he has a big year this year, then he's all of a sudden a big dynasty asset again. So while we're looking at all these players in a redraft sense, I think that a lot of the young players can prove a lot this year. So are you a believer in Todd Gurley? I guess so, if you're taking him at the end of the second.
Oh, absolutely. I still think I believe in the talent. I don't watch hardly any college ball, but I did actually get to watch some Gurley because I'm a Georgia Bulldogs fan. So thanks to Booger. So
yeah, I was going to say it's not hard to connect the dots on why you're a Georgia fan.
He's a Georgia Bulldogs fan. I just watched the games with him.
Oh,
but I got to watch Gurley play in college, and even there, like I said, exposure to college game, I just wow, this guy really pops on the screen. So I knew he'd be a good talent coming into the league. I think with the coaching change in Los Angeles with the Rams, I think that they're going to try to find a way to get him more into space instead of just running him into 8-man boxes every single play. They brought in they're bringing in as a pass catching back Lance Dunbar, so that'll take a little heat off them in the passing game. They're trying to improve their weapons around Jared Goff. They've got that rookie tight end they brought in. They still have the tight end from last year. Some passing options, though I wouldn't call any of them particularly elite. But I think he's in for a better year. I saw a Twitter poll. Someone was asking which side of a trade they like between Todd Gurley and who is it? Devontae Adams. That was a trade. Todd Gurley for Devontae Adams straight up.
Yeah, I saw you got upset about that one. I would agree. I would prefer Gurley. And that's even saying I'm probably even keel on Gurley, and I'm heavy on wide receivers when ranking in Dynasty. So I would argue that the biggest addition for Todd Gurley was Andrew Whitworth.
Yeah, I agree. Just getting some improvement on that line to open up. Like I said, no matter what at this point, you got to figure that the Rams are going to be facing some pretty stacked boxes until Goff can prove that he can, succeed at an NFL level. So he's probably going to start the year off maybe a little slow. Might still be a good time to buy in Dynasty, to be honest with you. But I think he's still got the potential to really take off. He's got the draft pedigree that's always important. Yeah. I think he's still going to be an asset.
Yeah, I agree. I would almost be buying most of that Rams offense just because it's basically free. Obviously Gurley isn't, but if you're looking at him for a buy low top RB1, he has the opportunity to get back into that range, to get back into the conversation with David Johnson and Ezekiel Elliott and Le'Veon Bell, the way that I don't know many other running backs have the opportunity to. At least from a perceived standpoint, even if Devonta Freeman continues at the pace he's been on the past 2 years, I don't know if he gets that level of respect. that those other three that I mentioned do. What are your thoughts on the Rams offense moving forward, Jake?
So I get with Gurley especially, I'm not looking for a guy who's gonna, get me 5 yards of carry or who's gonna move the chains every time. It reminds me a little bit of when we used to watch Chris Johnson down in Tennessee, where it was, three rushes in a row for like 2 yards, or even like Adrian Peterson up in Minnesota, where he didn't do a lot of the time, but the stuff that he did that was special just was week winning, was league winning, was year winning. And that's what we've seen from Gurley for his entire career. He just has these spectacular runs where either he takes what the blocking gets and then he keeps going, or he just makes it for himself. And we didn't see a lot of that last year, but it's not like his rookie year he was, behind a good offensive line, and Case Keenum was his quarterback, if I'm not mistaken. It's not like his situation has gotten really any worse or better. And so if you're telling me that you're going to take him away from the ground and pound Jeff Fisher unimaginative offenses that have been plaguing the NFL for the past 15 years and give him someone who actually is going to try and use him creatively, I mean, you're in Washington, Carl. It's like Rob Kelly is not. I mean, Rob Kelly's fine. He's is a reasonable running back. If you're telling me the guy who figured out how to make him a useful fantasy player for us is going to not do something at least equal with Todd Gurley, who at least is significantly more talented. And then I'm gonna disagree with you on the wide receivers. I'm not going to buy any of them. I just, even for the low price, it's not the problem that there's a lot of. It's not the problem that there's too many mouths to feed. It's just that I don't particularly think any of them are that good. Now, if you want to talk about Gerald Everett, a fan of Gerald Everett, the rookie tight end, glorified wide receiver, he is Jordan Reed, and a poor man's Jordan Reed, but I'm just not going to touch that receiving game at all.
Yeah, Gurley actually only had 2 rushes over 20 yards last year, so he's going to have to make up for that boom bust reputation that you're giving him that was only pretty much bust last year. Jesse, run us down the rest of your team.
All right, so after Gurley in the third, I got Derek Carr. A little quarterback run happened, so I figured I might as well jump on one at that point. I know you're not the hugest fan of Carr's game, Carl, but I certainly
I like Carr. It's just with the extension and with like hashtag QB wins, he's just overrated in that sense. And I think he was worth the money. It's just that when people hear that he got the most ever, contract money is all about timing. I mean, Matt Stafford, Kirk Cousins, they all are probably going to get their contracts right at the right time. But no, I like him. I think he's in a dynasty sense. I'd rather have Mariota. I'd rather have Cam. I'd rather have Jameis Winston, but he's right there after them.
Yeah, fair enough. I just took him because a little run on quarterbacks happened.
Sure.
Like I said, Jameis, Cousins, Mariota all went before him. So I was actually surprised because I'd probably take Carr over at least Cousins and maybe Winston. I like Mariota a little better. But anyway, so I went Derek Carr in the third. Took my next QB in the fourth. I got Andy Dalton because there was, again, that big run on QBs. Eli
your division went really heavy on QBs.
Oh, yeah. The first the four picks right before I took Dalton were Ben, Dak, Tyrod, and Eli. So I said, you know what? If I don't take one now, I might be missing out. So I got Dalton to back up Carr. Start of the fifth round, I took Tyler Eifert as the tight end. Just, again, position. I thought the way that Scott set up the scoring, I'm going to need at least one tight end that can score some points, and Eifert was the best option, in my eyes, left on the board at that point. And my draft is now just finishing round 5. The 5-12 is on the clock, so that's as far as I am so far.
Awesome. So I took Tom Brady in the first round. The way I used 4 for 4 for my rankings, the way that I set it up, and I actually spent a lot of time, since 4 for 4 doesn't have the option for first downs. I kind of had to tinker with it, and since you have to put in how many players are going to be starting rather than flex, I had to tinker with that. They do allow for decimal points for how many players you're starting, so I tinkered around with a lot. So my thinking behind Tom Brady, first of all, Aaron Rodgers was already gone, but let's say, for instance, Aaron Rodgers wasn't, and I was at the 108, by the way. So all those top running backs were off the board. Some of the tier 2 running backs were off the board. Mike Evans was off the board for some reason. So he was the first wide receiver taken at 106. So my thinking behind Tom Brady, kind of like what Jake said with Jack Doyle, was that I'm going for first place. And I believe Tom Brady, more so than Antonio Brown, more so than one of those, Jay Ajayi and Jordan Howard may have been picked, but say, for instance, they weren't, instead of one of those, I'm thinking who can break records this year? That's what I was thinking. And I think Tom Brady was playing just as well, if not better, last year than he did on his 2007 pace. And they added Brandon Cooks. They got Dwayne Allen to come in for Martellus Bennett. Probably not as good of a kind of a bit of a downgrade there, but still good. I almost said Wes Welker. Julian Edelman is still there, playing just as well as ever. I mean, we saw his amazing feat in the Super Bowl. Malcolm Mitchell is coming into his own. I mentioned Gronk. He's getting healthy. So I just thought Brady has the opportunity to break records this year. So that's why I took him. In the second round, Julio fell to me at 205. So much like Jesse said, Antonio was the reason, he wanted Antonio. I look at Julio as maybe like a little bit of a discount Antonio. I think that Antonio Brown's the best wide receiver in the league, and I would have taken him as the first wide receiver if I were given that opportunity. But Julio was there, so I took him. In the third round, I knew I had to get a running back. I think that there's a little bit of hate surrounding Lamar Miller. I know he wasn't great last year. I'm not a big Foreman fan. I think that anybody better than Brock Osweiler will have this offense going this year. So Lamar Miller might be able to get back up to speed. There weren't a lot of great options still there. And then in the fourth round with the 405, I wanted to get a quarterback. Cam, Mariota, and Carr went just before me, and I was about to pull the trigger on Dak Prescott, looking at my man 4for4 John's rankings, John Paulson. He had Dak a little bit lower, had guys like Stafford over him. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm gonna pull the trigger on a guy who, again, I think has league-winning potential in the fourth round, and that's T.Y. Hilton. I mean, the dude beasted out last year. I think he's like, a slightly cheaper Antonio Brown, and I mean that actually stylistically this time when I compare him to Antonio Brown. Andrew Luck could be just chucking it up to him all year. We don't know if Moncrief is ever going to pan out. Everybody's pretty much upset with Philip Dorsett, putting him on the back burner. I mean, T.Y. Hilton could legitimately be worth an early second rounder in hindsight this year. So I went with him, and I'm going to have to address the quarterback and running back and tight end position, coming up soon. But Jake, I'll start with you. I wanted to ask you about some of these players that I just mentioned as far as their dynasty value goes. What do you think about T.Y. Hilton? I feel like he's been undervalued his entire career. He is going as the 14th overall player in June ADP, according to Dynasty League Football. But I think his ADP is finally getting caught up to who he actually is.
Yeah, he should be higher. I mean, I don't really understand why. I like Melvin Gordon a lot, but the T.Y. Hilton is a league-winning wide receiver, and wide receivers just have so much value in Dynasty. I'm not sure why he's behind him. I'm not sure why he's behind Allen Robinson and DeAndre Hopkins after we saw. And I love both DeAndre Hopkins and Allen Robinson, but I just think what we've seen from T.Y. Hilton at this point is it's consistent, and it happens every year. My only concern with Hilton, I was going to ask you about this actually, was what do you think about him being tied to Andrew Luck? And just Luck's not Superman anymore. He's falling apart a little bit. We've had significant injuries the past couple seasons. Do you think that Hilton can sustain? I mean, he's shown it a bit, but can he sustain long-term success if Luck goes anywhere or is injured? And can he what do you think is going to happen with Luck going forward?
Well, let's see. How many years has Luck been in the league? Because Hilton was pretty good. So Luck's been in the league. Oh, okay. Hilton was drafted the same year. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he was the third round to Luck's first round.
Yeah. I think he would be a very good player, but I don't think Luck's going anywhere. I mean, he's on a long-term contract. Yeah, he's been beat up, but he's a big guy, so I think he can sustain the injury longer. Are you worried about Luck at all, Jesse?
Well, actually, we were just talking about this the other day. I was out having a couple of beers with the guys, and they asked me, as I'm a Luck owner in my home league, they said, when do you get concerned that he still hasn't begun rehab and throwing or any of that this offseason? And I said, to be honest with you, I'm getting a little concerned right now. He came off major injury, came off major surgery, and the Colts are still being pretty quiet about a timeline. I mean, I know it's really early right now, but a lot of teams are starting to hold their little mini camps, and the quarterbacks invite the wide receivers out, and they have like a little, party on the beach, throw the football around kind of thing. And Luck can't participate in anything right now because he hasn't started throwing yet at all. So I'm starting to get a bit concerned with his availability for training camp or even the start of the season. I don't know if that's maybe me panicking because I'm a Luck owner, but I'm getting a little worried at the lack of talk out of Indy about his recovery.
All right, well, let's talk about another guy that I had on my Scott Fishbowl team. That's Tom Brady. Now, I know I'm crazy, and I jumped the gun last year, and I said that he wasn't worthwhile anymore. I think that there's a legitimate case to say that he's probably the QB1 this year. You could say the same about Aaron Rodgers. I'm not discounting him at all. But we're obviously giving Brady a huge discount in Dynasty due to his age. Jesse, what do you think about Tom Brady in Dynasty? I'm looking up his ADP right now. He is currently the QB. Wow, he's really down there. No, he's not. He's the QB9. Okay, that's actually a little higher than I thought he would be. What do you think about him as the QB9?
I think that's fair. I mean, in Dynasty especially, youth rules all. But at the same time, I mean, he's ahead of Dak Prescott. He's ahead of Matthew Stafford. He's ahead of Carson Wentz, Kirk Cousins, all guys that are obviously much younger than him. The only guy around his age is Drew Brees right behind him, ironically. But from the quarterback position, especially in 1 QB leagues, we're finding, and I think a lot of the mentality, a lot of the sharper people in Dynasty right now are finding that let's just wait on QB as long as we can, get a Phillip Rivers, a Ben, an older guy, plug him in there and ride him all season long. You're going to get the consistent points out of him. He's going to produce. The risk of injury, I find, is really low with a lot of these older guys because they've learned how to not put themselves in a situation where they're going to get as banged up. So I think Brady's still a good value, even at QB9.
Phillip Rivers is going 5 rounds later if you're into that. Jacob, what do you think about Brady as the quarterback 9?
I mean, if you're telling me that, so right now he's going right next to Zay Jones, who's the 15th rookie off the board. If you're telling me I can spend the 203 and get safely 1 season, probably maybe 2 seasons, I think we're at a point where we can project Brady 1 season forward. Like you said, even in a 1 QB dynasty, that's league winning power right there compared to even the guy who's going to run out Phillip Rivers. If Jesse's going to run out Phillip Rivers and I'm going to run out Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers is fine. He's a weekly low end QB1, high end QB2, but Tom Brady's a league winner, and I'll pay that price any day of the week for a difference maker on my team. And maybe that makes me a little short-sighted, but the value is just there at this point for him, for Breeze, for any of these quarterbacks, as Jesse said.
So obviously, Tom Brady was out a little bit last year. He scored 21.5 points per game. This is just fantasydata.com, their scoring system. 21.5, and Phillip Rivers scored 16.2, 16.3, 16.2. So yeah, you're getting 5.3 points extra per game, but with Rivers, you're getting possibly 4 more years. That's a good point.
It's so easy to find a QB, though. I'm not terribly worried about being able to buy the next Rivers or the next, if it even has to be someone like Flacco for a year or 2 while I'm waiting for someone else to develop. I think there's enough value in that difference of 5 points per game that I think it's worth the league, the chance of winning.
So Kirk Cousins and Matt Stafford, or let's just say, okay, no, they are both right in that range. Kirk Cousins and Matt Stafford are going 2 rounds later than Tom Brady. Again, Tom Brady 21.5 points per game last year. Kirk Cousins 18.8, so only 2.5 points more per game, 2.5 points more per game. And Matthew Stafford 17.5, so there is a bit of a disparity with him. But you got Dak Prescott going after him, who scored about 18 points per game. That's only 3.5 points difference. I think I'm going with the younger guys there. I get it, and we're just comparing apples to apples here because we're quarterbacks to quarterbacks, and it's a tough comparison. I guess it's not completely apples to apples because you're taking age over production. I think I would prefer not only the 2 rounds extra with Cousins for only a couple points difference per game, or the possibly 10 or more years difference with Dak Prescott, and you could probably say the same with Cousins, maybe a 6-year difference. I think I would just take the younger guys there. I get it. I get that he has league-winning potential, but those extra couple points, I feel like I can make up somewhere else and not have to spend that pick. That's just me personally.
I think that's fair. I also worry about projecting so far into the future with any player. It's a little safer with QB saying that, Dak Prescott's going to be around for a while after what we saw, but it's so hard for me to look beyond that.
But it's also tough. But it's also tough for me to say a 39-year-old quarterback. Look, I'm the guy that just said that I could see him breaking records this year, so I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth. But in Dynasty, you want long-term security with some of these players, and I'm not even sure. I could see Tom Brady breaking records this year. I could also see him not finishing out the year because he's 39. I know he takes care of his body, but at some point you bust a knee and it just doesn't heal the way it used to.
No, you're right. It's a gamble, and I think it's also entirely team dependent, which I get as a cop out. But if you're in the right place, I think that Brady makes sense. If you're not in the right place, then he makes sense on someone else's team that you can get good value for. Hopefully.
Very true. Very true. And in my home league, I believe I'm the best team. Now other teams could probably make the case. Jesse has a pretty good team there. In that league, I could see myself trading for Tom Brady if to Jesse's point earlier, if I didn't already earn Phillip Rivers. I'm fine with that. I'm not looking to upgrade that position when I have Phillip Rivers. It's not, but I'll spend draft capital on my wide receiver 8. I'm perfectly okay doing that, but I don't need to upgrade Phillip Rivers right now. I have Teddy Bridgewater as a backup, and he's the next Tom Brady, right?
Sure he is. That's what we've been saying in Minnesota for a couple of years, just waiting on him.
Jesse, I want to get your opinion on another guy I took. We've kind of run the gambit on all those guys. I think everybody's opinion on Julio Jones is the same, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on him. But what about Lamar Miller? He was a guy that a lot of Dynasty owners were really hyped about when he got out of Miami, because everybody thought, including myself, that they just didn't use him correctly. They didn't give him the ball enough. He was extremely efficient as a Dolphin. Then he went to Houston. The entire offense kind of sucked. Brock Osweiler wasn't what he was in Denver. DeAndre Hopkins wasn't what he was when he had Brian Hoyer throwing him the ball. And Lamar Miller wasn't what he was in Miami. Will Fuller had a little bit of a bright spot, but he was injured. He wasn't what he was in Notre Dame, at least long term. Do you believe that Lamar Miller can come back to form? Do you believe this entire offense can come back to form? What are you expecting there?
I think so. I mean, the prevailing thought with Houston is that they're a quarterback away from being a championship contender, just based on their defense alone.
Look, they almost beat – they would have beaten the Patriots with a real quarterback last year in the playoffs. They would have beaten the Patriots. I mean, go back and watch that game. They were a drive away from winning.
Well, Atlanta was a couple of quarters away from winning the Super Bowl against them too. So
sure.
Never count the Patriots out, as much as I don't like them.
Oh, of course.
But I see your point. But I think Miller's a great bounce back candidate. I think he's a good I wouldn't say buy low because you're still probably paying RB1 prices to get him. Yeah. But I think, you know, as far as the back end of that first round of running backs or first group of running backs, he's probably the guy you can maybe target, get a guy who got frustrated with him last year and maybe get him at a bit of a discount right now.
The running back 17 right now.
Yeah, so I mean, there's guys ahead of him that I probably would kind of fade and prefer Lamar Miller too. I think he's got a good chance to regain value this year. I do think that he is usage dependent. Like I think Miami was maybe a little bit onto something, whereas you don't just run the guy into the ground, and he's maybe a guy that does need to be spelled, but that's the way the NFL is right now. There's very few teams that can just run a running back into the ground anymore. So I think if used properly, and I got to believe that Houston, you know, they made the playoffs with Brock Osweiler playing, you know, like I play in my backyard. So I got to believe that the coaching staff will find a way to utilize him properly, give him the usage that he needs to succeed. And I could see him being a good bounce back candidate this year.
Yeah, he had his lowest yards per carry. He had his least receiving yards since his sophomore year. But let's be serious here. He went over 1,000 yards. He had 31 receptions, almost, you know, over 1,200 all-purpose yards. He had 6 touchdowns. I mean, if you think that, hey, he adds a few more touchdowns this year, I think he's back in that conversation as being a value. I'm looking at the ADP now. There's not too many guys over him I would prefer. I would prefer him too. I think he's probably right around the right spot for me in Dynasty. I would prefer him to Isaiah Crowell. It'd be a tough decision between him and Dalvin Cook, but I think you got to go Cook, at least for perceived value. What are you doing with the Texans offense, Jake?
I actually really so their line per PFF even is not very good. And I think that's actually something that's going to help Miller. You know, Donta Foreman's drafted, but he's a guy who's going to run fast and get what's blocked for him very quickly.
I agree with that. He's going to get what's blocked for him.
But I mean, we're looking at in 2000.
I think he's much more than that.
Yeah, in 2015, you know, we're looking at 47 receptions for 400 yards in Miami for Miller. You know, a worse offensive line with semi-competent quarterback play. I mean, if Jesse's going to go out for the Texans, I'll draft Miller a spot higher. But that can't be bad for Miller. Actually, I think he's one of the few running backs whose actually usage might be more preferable for us if the team's not as good, because he will, if he's going to be the Lightning and the Thunder and Lightning with Foreman, as seems to be the plan, then let the team be bad. Let me have the guy who's going to make the catches and get us those PPR points at a discount.
Yeah, I think that I think he's a good bet for early down work. But as you mentioned, he could get into the passing game.
I'm not suggesting that he's going to be anything but he's going to be the main running back.
Yeah,
that was not what I was saying.
No, I know you weren't. I wasn't trying to suggest otherwise. Jesse, so what do you think about doing next with your next pick? How many spots to go are you in the Scott Fish Bowl?
Well, like I said, 5:12 is on the clock right now. So I am up next at the 6:10. So I'm almost waiting around. The way I've built my team so far, where I've only got the one running back, the one wide receiver, I've got my quarterbacks fairly set for at least my starting two. I'm probably going to have to go running back next, just based on positional need and the way the scoring's set up, unless a really good tight end is sitting there. So I'm hoping that there's a little bit of a run on maybe some quarterbacks, maybe some guys start seeing these really good-looking wide receiver names out there. Dez, Amari just went. Allen Robinson just got picked. So I'm hoping with the depth at wide receiver, some of these guys ahead of me make some picks in the wide receiver range, leave me some running backs.
Yeah, I'm coming up soon too, I believe. I can't unfortunately, I can't pull up while I'm doing the podcast because I'm under the podcast email. I can't log into my league. But yeah, all I have is Lamar Miller. I need to address the running back position. All I have at quarterback is Tom Brady. I need to address that position. I have nothing at tight end. I might go the Jake route and take a tight end coming up soon. It's an interesting, fun draft. There's 720, you said 720 different people in this draft. Pretty much every fantasy analyst that you could think of is in this thing, and then so many fans, and it's all for a good cause. Scott does the Fantasy Cares for Toys for Tots. It's such a cool league, and it's so cool, like getting on the timeline and seeing like everyone talk about Scott Fish. Everybody has their Scott Fishbowl avatars. I know Jake and I both got ours done by, I hope I get it right, NFL Draft Talker.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, he did a good thing for the whole Scott Fishbowl community and made custom Twitter avatars for everybody. It's so cool, like seeing everybody in the same draft, you know.
It's just a big community, you know. It brings us all together. It kind of shows how big, but also how close this whole community is. To see, you know, anyone you've ever heard of on a a podcast or read some of their work, they're just in this Scott Fishbowl, and you see them all tweeting, you know, using Scott's hashtag, the SFB7 hashtag there. I saw someone was talking, there's two guys arguing, and one of them just happened to mention that they were Canadian. And I said, holy, there's other Canadians in this thing. You know, let's all represent. I probably got about 9 or 10 different people kind of, you know, retweeting at me like, yeah, go Brothers, you know, we're bringing that thing north of the border. So it's just weird how even like there's micro communities within the community, all because of Scott's amazing hard work.
Absolutely, man. We're going to look back like 10 years from now when fantasy football is illegal and I'm in a political jail under the White House, and we're going to reminisce about the Scott Fishbowl for sure. All right. Anything else you guys want to mention before we go? I know training camps are starting up soon. So we had last week where I forgot to record the first half of the podcast with Jesse, and then this week where we're talking about the Scott Fishbowl. I mean, hopefully we did get in some Dynasty talk as well, but we have real news around the corner. I mean, there's football coming soon. I'll be visiting Redskins camp. I'll be giving my thoughts about the players there. Training camps are starting up soon, though, so we have real news to talk about soon. But anything Scott Fishbowl related or Dynasty related, either one of you want to jump in with? I'll take that as a no. Okay.
I'm good for now.
Well, as Jake and I have talked about in the past, we're taking any submissions for anybody that wants to write about fantasy football. If you don't think you're good enough, try anyway. We are willing to work with you. We've gotten a ton of submissions, so I think I've reached out to pretty much everyone. If I haven't reached out to you yet, I will be getting to you. We've got a ton of feedback from that. Jesse has mentioned in the past, you know, that just trying and doing it was enough to get the juices flowing. And Jake and I were talking off air before Jesse even joined about how much we love his work. So if you haven't done it before, we'll work with you. Just shoot us an email at dynastyOnefantasy@gmail.com. That's dynasty, the number 1 fantasy@gmail.com. And as always, we really, really appreciate you subscribing, leaving us a review, rating us on iTunes. That's what keeps the podcast going, seriously. So if you could take a second to do that, maybe shoot us an email with your review. We really appreciate it. We'll give you some recognition on Twitter or on the show. And as always, you could follow me at Carl Safchik. You could follow Jesse, unfortunately, with an underscore in his name, at DF_Patterson. You could follow Jake at Jacob. Is it Jacob Henry or Jake Henry?
Jacob Henry. At
Jacob Henry FF. And as always, give us a shout out on the Twitter at Dynasty One Podcast on Twitter. That's at Dynasty, the number 1 podcast. Everybody, thank you for listening. And next week we'll be back with some training camp talk. Everybody have a good week. All right, good show, guys.
Yeah, good stuff. I was starting to break up at the end there too, so I'm glad you didn't have actually ask me any questions there.
Oh, cool. I heard Jake break up here and there, but it was like so little that I think either Shane can fix it or it might not be very noticeable.
Yeah, yours too. You had a couple of crack in and outs, but I think that might have just been on my end. So
yeah, hopefully it's like all on the audio end and not on the like actual YouTube end.
Shane works magic.
Yeah.
So before we go, Carl, what are you going to get arrested for that gets you underneath the White House?
Let me
just
stop
curious.
the broadcast before.